Effing's life was turned upside down when she suffered a traumatic brain injury after falling 25 feet in a skiing accident. Once training 5 days a week in hopes of becoming an Olympic athlete, Denise has had to quit sports altogether and forge a new path. Denise since has started the blog Where's Effing, chronicling her health and travel journeys and a personal observation as she rediscovers life through a new lens. Thank you so much, Denise, for coming and speaking with us today. We're happy to have you. What is your difference and how would you define it in your own words?
So I have a brain injury, or a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, when I was almost 2 weeks before my 14th birthday. I fell 25 feet skiing and I had a concussion, and a year later to the day I had another concussion. And so I've just been dealing with everything that comes with that and all of the different really, really interesting ways it can mess up your body.
Right. So what is a concussion in your own terms for those that may not know? Because there's a lot of different ways people describe concussions.
Yeah, so the standard is you get a blow to your head and then you usually have headaches for a few days, and then that's kind of it. With a traumatic brain injury, and my experience specifically, I have many headaches. My brain, for medical people out there, the brain doesn't technically swell, but it feels like it's swelling. So you have a lot of pressure in your brain, nausea, headaches, dizziness. And the way that I like to describe it to people is that it's as if your body is a car and your motor's the brain, and when the motor isn't working, everything starts to fall apart. And that's kind of been my experience with it, and it's just very up and down, and especially having had the first brain injury, after a year of trying to fix that and get better, I had a second one, and that really hindered the progress of healing.
Right. And so how did your second concussion happen?
The second concussion was not as theatrical as the first one.
Okay.
I was just taking the score of a basketball game at school, and a kid decided to kick a basketball to my head to see what would happen. And I had been told by multiple doctors and everyone on my medical team that if I were to be hit again, that I could potentially die. So I just got hit and immediately just thought, okay, it would be really traumatic if my classmates saw me die right now. So I left class and I went into the locker room and I just sat down, closed my eyes, waited. And then the bell rang, and so I knew it had been past 5 minutes, so I left and walked straight to Lenox Hill for an MRI.
Right. Oh, wow. And so when you first had your first concussion, which was when you fell skiing, when did you start experiencing symptoms?
Immediately. I mean, as soon as I remember flying, looking down and being like, this is pretty cool, I'm flying. And then I hit the ground, and I remember my friend Nick coming up to me being like, oh my God, that was so cool. You got so much air on that jump. And then I remember not fully understanding what was happening, and I remember looking up at him and seeing blotchy spots and shaking, like profusely shaking, but I wasn't cold. And then my helmet was split in half and being held together by my goggles. I went to my coach and I was like, don't know what's going on. My friend was explaining, like, I had fallen, I had hit my head, I needed to go to first aid, which for anyone who doesn't ski is like the emergency service of a ski hill. And he said I needed to wait 15 minutes because he was busy. But I ended up getting there, and I remember thinking that the nurse had one eye. It just looked like she had one eye in the middle of her forehead, like those like Monster Inc. people. And obviously she didn't, because I've met her since, but that was my vision at the time. And I don't remember headaches, specifically, but I was very nauseous, and I remember everyone trying to keep me awake, telling me I couldn't go to sleep, I needed to stay awake, and all of that. And then I ended up going to the hospital, and they released me into my mother's care because she's a medical professional. And then I ended up being 3 weeks with my eyes covered. My mom didn't let me have any solid food because chewing is very intense on your brain. And I didn't walk around. I didn't listen to music. I wasn't allowed to watch TV, anything. And I had drank liquid stuff like smoothies. And then for 3 months, I didn't get to listen to music. In 6 months, I didn't get to read, watch movies, anything. I kind of just was a vegetable of myself, not because I was doing so terribly, but for recovery purposes, because my mother has seen it go so poorly in her practice and things like that.
Right. And so how did this affect you on a daily basis in terms of your social life, schooling?
School was tough because it's kind of 13, 14 is where you start having crushes, you start making friends that you really understand life with, that you want to spend life with. I was on a track to go to the Olympics for Taekwondo, and that was always my dream, was to be an athlete, to be a professional athlete, and I was out of school for so long. And so this happened in March, and so I ended the school year having not gone back to school truly for a long period of time, and then I went back the next year and still was not doing well. I started getting better around the end of the year, right before my second concussion. And that's really where it screwed up everything. I mean, I lost friends because it's hard to understand at that age. Now we're 15, 16, understanding that like I look fine, and I'm a very good actress where I'm going to pretend that I'm completely fine until I physically am unable to do so. And so it's hard for people to understand that. And they just, it's hard for kids, and it's easier to have a friend who isn't difficult than to have a friend that is.
Right.
So that's kind of the way they went.
Right. And so what type of treatments or therapies do you do to alleviate your symptoms?
I have done so many things. I mean, I've met with doctors from Germany, from everywhere, as I assume many chronically ill, chronic pain people deal with. I lived in Montreal for a few weeks to do treatment there. I did neurofeedback. I've done chiropractic therapies, acupuncture, UVBI, IVs, literally any acronym you can think of. I've tried it, I've done it. Nothing has helped, honestly. So that's obviously very frustrating. And you hit a point where it's more frustrating for the people around you and the people who truly are trying to help, which you've experienced. A lot of medical people, a lot of people in the medical field are not. It really gives a blow to their ego if they're not able to be the one that fixes you. And then it turns on to, you must not be doing everything I'm saying. But I have one doctor who has been with me since the beginning, and she's incredible, and she will do everything she can to make sure that I get a call back from a doctor, that I get my results. And she's probably the reason why I'm still around. And my mother, again, is in the medical field, and so those two powerful, highly intelligent, very gifted women are probably the reason why I'm still going, even though nothing has truly worked. And the only thing that does help when I am in acute pain, where I call them crashes, where I'm not functioning, I'm not coherent at all, is traction therapy or craniosacral therapy that my mother does as a Canadian osteopath. And those tend to help. So I think it might kind of take the edge off, but it doesn't hold as a treatment practice.
Right.
Whereas for many people it does. It just does not work for me.
Right.
As a one-time fix.
Right. In 2020, you started the blog, Where's Effing, where you've regularly posted your writings. Can you tell us more about the blog and what the inspiration was to start it?
Yeah, so I used to be a singer-songwriter. That was kind of my path after I had my brain injury and I realized I was not allowed to become a professional athlete anymore. I had always written since I was little. I had a poetry book that I'm still very upset somebody lost somewhere. I don't know where it is, but I'm sure they were terrible poems. But I used to just write all the time, and I would write in planes. I would write on Post-its like, this person in the third row is really upsetting me because whatever. I used to write to trees, inanimate objects, anything. And I would just write them letters and sign them, and either I would keep them or I would just leave them behind. And with Where's Effing, I started writing specifically about what I was feeling on a day-to-day basis. And if you do read them, I like to warn people that they are very raw and intense. I curse, I am very specific to what I'm feeling, I'm very honest. Like, I'm not saying like, look, I have a chronic illness, but like, everything's all good. No, it's not. It sucks. Like, today it sucked, or yesterday it sucked. I'm not without hope, but it does suck. And the point of Where's Effing was to validate people. And validate whatever you're going through of, like if you're having a bad day, that sucks. And because you hear people and say all the time when they're trying to reach out to people with mental health and make them feel okay about it, and the very famous saying is, it's okay not to be okay.
Right.
It's not okay not to be okay. You should be thriving. You should be the best that you can be. You should be happy. You should be content. And it's okay not to be okay right now, but it's not okay to stay in that state and continue like that. And so my idea was just to validate that, I don't know, let's say you didn't go to the supermarket and they didn't have the orange juice you wanted and you're upset about it. That's okay. Like, that sucks. And I never believed in comparing pain, comparing hardships, because I grew up around very wealthy people. I remember this one girl at school had lost her Chanel bag, and she was so upset about this. And I was explaining this to a friend who isn't so wealthy, and she was like, oh, poor little rich girl lost her Chanel bag. And I tried to explain that if that's the worst thing that's happened in her life, that's the worst thing that has happened in her life. It doesn't matter that you went through cancer. It doesn't matter that children in Africa are dying of starvation. Yes, that's upsetting and it's horrible, and we understand that on a global scale. However, she has no way to relate to that because that's not what's happened to her. And so losing that bag is upsetting, and it's difficult for that person. I've never lost my Chanel bag. I'm not attached to physical things, but I can understand that for her, that sucked and that was annoying for her. And I have horrible headaches and I have horrible pain. I'm in pain 24/7, but if a friend of mine is like, I have such a bad headache, often they'll be like, oh, not like your headaches. That's fine. Your headache is your headache. If it sucks, it freaking sucks. Like, there's no point in us comparing pain. And that's all I wanted to do. And then the other point is, I lost a lot of friends. I had a lot of issues with family members when I would explain everything I'm going through, and they'd be like, but I don't understand. And I tried to explain, and I continue to explain to people, and that's the other leg of Where's Effing, is that it doesn't matter if you understand, you just need to believe me. You just need to believe that I'm in pain, that I'm having a hard time. I don't understand either. I have no idea what's going on. I know that I fell. I was really pissed off. They told me I could never go to the Olympics. I'm still pissed. And now I'm in pain all the time. No one knows what's going on. And, you just need to believe me. That's it. For anyone who has mental health issues, who has a physical disability, anything like that, I don't understand that you can't use your leg, because I don't have the physical ability to understand that. I have both my legs, but I believe that that's something you're going through. And that's something that doesn't always translate as easily to somebody who doesn't have a physical, visible disability. And that's kind of what I'm trying to explain to people, that your understanding of it doesn't not make it real.
Right. I get it.
Like,
You're
that's
making
it.
a difference, you know, in any which way, regardless of the way people take it, whether they understand, they don't understand.
Yeah.
You're making a difference.
I hope so.
I know that for 100%. So where are you right now in your journey in managing, you know, your symptoms?
Yeah, so it's funny, not haha funny, but I kind of think it's funny in general because it's just ridiculous. I'm not in a good place. The last year has been really terrible, and when you called me to do this interview a few days ago was really the first day I was coherent in a good week and a half, 2 weeks. The last few months, I lived in California. I've been a ski instructor for 10 years. I just retired. And I remember calling my boss and being like, hey, I have a terrible headache today. Like, I'm not able to walk today. I can't come into work. And then that would go on for a few days. And then I called and was like, I have a kidney infection now. And I can't come into work. And those are incredibly traumatic phone calls for me to make because it makes me feel like I'm a failure, like I've failed everybody. And so I deal with a lot of PTSD from that. So this year has been a huge growth from my PTSD. Not in a good way where I've figured it out, in a way where it just is getting worse and worse with every time I need to make these phone calls. And then I remember my last phone call before I quit skiing is I called my boss and I was like, look, I know it's ridiculous, but now I have an eye infection. Like, I'm done. I have to quit. I'm sorry. And he was incredibly understanding, and he never made me feel like it was my fault or anything, but I felt like such a failure. And anything from not being able to show up at work, even though I know my symptoms are real, I know I'm in pain, I know I have a kidney infection, like, they're all real things. It's not like I woke up and I was like, not feeling great today. Like, truly I'm not able to walk and function as a human being. But anyway, fast forward to 2 weeks ago where I haven't eaten in 6 days because I am just throwing up. I have horrible stomach pains. My abs are super hard from no idea what. Having horrible dizziness, nausea, headaches. Just everything sucks. Everything is in pain. I was doing IVs almost every other day. And, you know, and then it's 2 weeks and it's horrible and you have to cancel all of your dinner plans, all of your friends. And again, that continues the PTSD, continues the cycle. And then it just starts to alleviate and you're like, okay, great. So that's the 10th time I've crashed like that and we still don't know anything. So that's incredibly frustrating. And especially now after 10 years of going through this and not knowing when it's going to end is my most difficult thing to deal with. Because if somebody were to tell me it's going to be 30 years, that sucks. I would be very upset if it were another 30 years, but at least I have an end date where, okay, now it's been 30 years, it's going to end soon. Whereas now with chronic pain and chronic illness, this could go on forever. That's not the hope, and you keep hoping that that's not going to happen, but it's always a possibility, and that's the most frustrating for me. That there's no end in sight as far as you know. And I know that this is something that multiple people deal with in the chronic pain, chronic illness spectrum, but every time you meet a new doctor, every time you try a new method, you're diagnosed with something different. I've been diagnosed with 3 different deadly illnesses and I'm still here. And every doctor says it's something different. And at this point, it's just, I was at dinner with a friend yesterday, and I was like, oh, yesterday I was diagnosed with this new deadly thing. She's like, oh, that's funny. She's also chronically ill. but it's just a thing where you're in a weird space where like stuff like this is funny because it's just absurd.
Right.
Like nobody knows what they're doing.
Right.
And you just keep pushing, and if somebody's like, you have to take this weird root herb, it's going to make everything better, you're like, why the hell not? Let's do it. Like, I don't know.
You just go with the flow, as terrible as that may sound.
Yeah, I've taken so many weird herbs from wherever in Asia, Africa, I don't know. And you just take them and then you finish the bottle and you're like, okay, I'm not going to order that again.
Right.
I don't know what that did.
You're managing it as well as you can.
Yeah, a lot of it, I really believe in placebo. Of like, I don't know if this is working, but I'm going to do it and I'm going to take it because if I don't do it, maybe it'll make it worse. I don't know, but I'm not willing to see what happens.
Right.
So a lot of it is, I think, placebo.
Trial and error.
Yeah, and it's a really weird game to be picked for.
Right.
I always tell people, it's like somebody was like, you know what, you're going to go on this game show. It's going to be a really weird prize. You're going to have really weird things to deal with. And just, like, keep trying. We'll see what happens.
Right.
Like, it's super weird.
If you could tell your younger self something that you wish you knew now, what would it be?
So I know everybody wants me to say, like, everything happens for a reason. Okay, but I haven't figured out what this reason is, and I wish I hadn't jumped. And and it wasn't a jump in the sense where somebody pushed me into it or anything like that. That was what I did. Like, I was a ski jumper, I did tricks, I had done this jump multiple times. So saying that I wish I hadn't jumped or telling my younger self don't jump would have been I probably would have been like, you don't know anything, because I'd done it so many times. So I don't think I would tell her anything. I think I would just let her figure it out, because maybe in another reality, because this is obviously not real, I can't talk to my younger self. Right. If it was a different reality, maybe I would have landed it like every other time.
Well, thank you so much, Denise, for doing this. We've learned a lot. Your story is very powerful. It encompasses a lot of different things, and it's with your symptoms, and it's definitely a very important disorder or medical diagnosis to talk about.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thanks for having me.